Today on Your Cup of Counsel, we're talking about liability and claims against parents for acts of their children. So join us if you're a parent or if you know a parent. And we're drinking jam and coffee today. Um, we're drinking this because I met the owners of Jam and Coffee at my gym at a pop up, and I bought their coffee, and it was absolutely delicious. And I really hope they see this. We'll tag them in the show notes, and we'd really love to have one of them, one or both of them, on as guests on the pod. So stay tuned for that. Like, subscribe, follow, and we hope to see you back on our next episode. So, Anjay, many of our listeners have children, and we get a lot of questions about what makes a parent liable for acts of their kids if their kids, one of their children hurts or injures someone else. So, give us the tea on all of that. When is a parent liable, and for what type of act?
So there's so many different things. There's statutory liability, which generally have caps. So you're capped off at a certain level of dollars per incident, depending on what the incident is. And then there's also direct liability that can be imposed against the parents if the parents had advanced knowledge of like dangerous propensities or gave the child a gun and they knew that they had mental health issues or something like that. So it really kind of varies. And I think we should probably just dive in and kind of break down the different categories of when statutory liability can attach and when it can be like more broadly direct liability against the parent.
Yeah. Okay. And just to back up for a second for our listeners' benefits, what is statutory liability?
So it's a law. It's a law on the books, black letter law that says your child can't graffiti a public building.
Mm-hmm.
And there is statutory liability that attaches to a parent of a child that graffitis a building so that the city or county or whoever can get reimbursed for the graffiti because most, 13, 14-year-olds don't have any money. So they can go after the parents to recoup the cost of remediating the graffiti.
Got it. And then what's direct liability? What's the difference?
So direct liability is where the parent actually had some involvement. So like in the graffiti example, if your kid went and got a paint marker and was marking up the side of a muni bus, you maybe didn't necessarily know about that. But if you know that your kid is a tagger and you take them down to the hardware store and you go buy spray paint where you have to be 18 and present an ID, and you know that you're purchasing that because they're going to be going and tagging public buildings, you could have direct liability for that.
Got it. That makes absolute sense. What are some of the theories of liability that run against parents that are recognized?
Yeah. So first of all, there's kind of this catch-all. It's Civil Code 1714.1, and it's for willful misconduct of a minor. So if your child intentionally, willfully injures someone or damages property, then you as the parent are responsible for whatever their action is as long as they're a minor and they're within your custody and control. So they live under your roof, they go out, they punch somebody and they knock out their front teeth and they have to go to the hospital and get medical treatment. You as the parent are responsible to pay those bills. Now there's a statutory cap and it changes every 2 years on the odd year in July. And when the statute was first written, can't remember when it was, like 2010 or 2011, something like that. I think it was initially written as a $25,000 cap, but it grows with inflation every 2 years. And so now in 2026, the current cap is, I think, $56,400. So if your child goes out, punches someone in the face, knocks out their teeth, they have to go get medical care, you as the parent could be found responsible up to $56,400 for the medical bills that they have to incur to get treatment.
Is any of this ever covered by insurance?
Great question. So it depends on what the actual willful conduct is, because a lot of insurance policies will write out intentional conduct. So not covered for like assault and battery, different stuff like that. But even if there is coverage in your insurance policy, under the statute itself, it's specifically written in that the insurer, so the insurance company, only has to pay $10,000. So the parent is exposed to $56,400, but the insurance company only has to pay $10,000 of that. So you as a parent are responsible to make up the difference.
And I'm guessing that's because the lobbyists for insurers are maybe stronger than the lobbyists for parents, unfortunately.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. So what about, I saw, we're always reading the news and reading about different verdicts and cases and things like that. I saw recently that a mother, I think this was in Orange County, was being prosecuted because her 14-year-old son was driving on an e-bike or an e-motorcycle or something and killed someone, and she was being charged
Yeah.
for involuntary manslaughter. And
Yeah.
that's criminal, but which is not civil, which is we're talking about civil now. But what tell us about that? What do you think is happening there from a liability
Yeah, so I
standpoint?
think that we're seeing this more in the headlines where parents are being charged for the crimes of their children. It's
Mhm.
definitely coming up in the civil space, but before that, or in the criminal space, but before that, it's been evolving in the civil space.
Well, with like firearms, right? That's one thing.
That's
Another
one
thing,
thing, but like
yeah.
e-bikes,
Hmm.
e-motorcycles, electric scooters, those scooters can go 40, 45 miles an hour
Hmm.
now. I mean, you're putting young people essentially at the wheel of pretty dangerous vehicles.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't know they require special licensing. So if you're a parent and you're thinking about getting an e-scooter, an e-bike, an e-motorcycle for your child, I encourage you to go to the DMV website, and it will break down the classification of the CCs of the vehicle. That's the speed, the engine speed, how fast the vehicle will go, and it will tell you what license, if any, is required for that classification of vehicle. So a lot of parents are going out buying for Christmas the, e-bike or the e-scooter that qualifies as an e-motorbike, that requires a motorcycle specialty license, that
Mm.
requires the individual to be 16 or older, and people don't know that. And so they're
Yeah.
giving them to 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and then they're going out and they're injuring people.
And so what happens in that situation? Is that a direct liability situation because they kind of broke the law in some
Yes.
ways by giving their kid who's 14 something that only a 16-year-old could have, for example?
Exactly. And I think that they're trying to increase public awareness about this.
Mhm.
Like I know in Marin County in the last couple of months, again, because there's been some accidents, there's been a lot of news coverage where the county is saying, hey, we don't want kids riding e bikes.
Mhm.
They're unsafe. They go too fast. They're on public roads. They're not stopping at stop signs. They're really kind of wrecking havoc on the neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And so I think the communities are getting a little bit more involved in kind of self policing and reporting. But in the case that you had mentioned, the woman down in Orange County, again, these are just allegations. I think the prosecution is still happening.
Mhm.
But she had purchased one of these e motorbikes for her son, who was 14, and he unfortunately hit somebody and killed them, an elderly man. She's being prosecuted because she bought the bike for him, knew that he was riding it, and they're actually, again, this is all just stuff I've seen in the media. She had interacted with the sheriff's department on a prior occasion and was captured on body camera footage saying that she knew that her child was riding this and was riding unsafely.
Mm.
And so by having that advanced knowledge and not, preventing him from continuing that activity as a parent, as a guardian, he's in your custody and control,
Mm.
then you yourself can face direct liability.
Wow. So that is just a huge warning signal to all parents that because these 14-year-old kids who are riding e-motorcycles don't mean to kill people, but
Right.
if they do, you're the one that could go to jail,
Right.
criminal jail for
Right.
that.
And yeah, absolutely. And again, there's the criminal space has a different burden of proof and
Sure.
everything than the civil space. But another thing to keep in mind in the civil space, a child is judged against a child of their age. So when you're looking at the reasonableness of conduct, they will be
Mhm.
judged like if it's a 9-year-old on an e-bike, they're going to be judged a little more lenient. But the parent is going to be judged at the parent standard. So all
Right.
parents should know that you shouldn't give, a vehicle to a 9-year-old that can go 45 miles an hour and
Yeah.
then just turn them loose on the public streets.
Yeah. Gosh, I remember when I first got my license, I was not the best driver. I don't think I was super unsafe. I didn't speed or anything. In fact, it was probably the opposite. I was probably driving too slow for the roads. And in Canada, the speed limit is even lower than here. So you can imagine
Wow.
I was a different level. But they're learning at that age, right? You're young, and so it just underscores how important I guess it is for parents to really try to police your children a bit, know what your kids are doing, make sure
Yeah.
that you're setting them up for success. And like you said, it's age appropriate. So you're not going to give, an 8-year-old rocks to throw off the overpass or something because an 8-year-old might listen to what you're telling them to do
Right. Make
and
bad
do something
choices.
really
Yeah.
bad about it. Right.
And the other thing is like our brains are not fully developed until I think like our mid 20s. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't be giving people that can't make necessarily the best choices for themselves access to things like vehicles that can hurt people. Firearms is another big one that
Yeah.
we should talk about.
Yeah.
So parents have responsibility when they give access to firearms to a minor, or they leave firearms in a environment in which a minor can access them, so they're not in a secure place.
Yep.
And that in and of itself is a separate statutory liability bucket that we could talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about that because
Okay.
I did see. I mean, recently, I think there was a case in 2024 and maybe even another one this year. I think where parents were charged for giving their children access to guns and then having like a school shooting happen, for example. An
Yep.
AR-15 style rifle was one example of that happening. And
Yeah.
and gun legislation and laws are very divisive in this country. And but I remember reading a lot about people being in some ways a bit relieved that the parents were getting some accountability because of how rampant gun violence is, especially in schools. And as you said, kids, especially if they're dealing with mental health issues or other things, may not be in the best position to make a decision that's good.
Yeah.
So parents need to be careful about gun safety.
Definitely. So guns kind of falls into that hybrid category where there's statutory liability that's under Civil Code 1714.3. So
Mhm.
you have to lock your guns. You can't give minors access or be negligent in the way that you're storing guns to allow them access to firearms.
Mhm.
If you do, you have liability under the statute, just black and white, you're liable.
Mhm.
It's capped because most statutory liability, unfortunately, against parents is capped. So it's $30,000 if they injure one or kill one person, $60,000 total, no matter how many victims there
Oh
are.
my good
Now that's
Lord.
statutory liability. So that just means you gave a minor access to a gun or you left it in a condition that was unlocked. You could also have direct liability that could exceed the cap if you knew your child had mental health issues and you were providing them access to a firearm.
Mhm.
You knew that your child had, made death threats against students or a neighbor or
Yeah.
a significant other, whoever it was, and you continue to give access to that. So the knowledge of the parent is going to be a big driver in whether or not there's going to be direct liability attached.
Mhm. I mean, that makes sense. That does make sense.
Yeah.
That there would be more liability under those circumstances. Um, what are other areas that we haven't covered? And maybe just before we move on, I often wonder how insurance plays into gun violence as well. And part of my wondering about that is because I worked on a case recently representing the city of San Jose, actually, because they enacted the first law of its kind in the country requiring gun owners to have insurance for their firearms. And it could be through their homeowners insurance, or it could they could be required to get a separate insurance policy covering that. And it was kind of a big deal because again, gun legislation is very hard to pass in this country in general because the gun lobby is so strong. But they were able to. We went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit. It was affirmed. And so as it stands right now, San Jose is requiring gun owners to have an attestation stored in the same place they have their gun stored that covers for victims of gun violence. That requires them to have insurance to provide coverage for victims
That's
of gun
amazing.
violence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also requires them, the other part of the statute that was a little less legally cognizable was that the city required them to charge a fee. They charged the gun owner a fee, and the fee went to social services and gun violence prevention services in the community. Which
Wow.
is, yeah, really novel. Sam Ricardo was the one who drafted it. He's now a congressman, so shout out to him. But yeah, so I just think gun violence is such an important thing. And again, this is one area where California has led the charge a little bit more than other states
Yeah.
when it comes to protecting victims.
And to me, I feel like, you're talking about there's a lot of public discourse on guns, right? And it can be a very polarizing topic. But I don't think that it should be polarizing when you're talking about things like responsible gun ownership,
I agree.
making sure that your weapons are locked,
Yep.
making sure that minors that don't have good judgment don't have access to them.
Or severely mentally ill people.
Right.
Yeah.
Carrying insurance if you are going to own a gun. I mean, these just, we have to do that for a vehicle. Why not for a gun? It just kind of seems like an entry level, low bar, low
Yes,
ask.
that was the justification for the law that we
Yeah.
passed. Absolutely.
Makes sense.
What are other areas where parents could be responsible for liability
So
for victims?
criminal restitution is one, which I have dealt with a couple times over the course of my career. So I do some car accident cases, unfortunately, some DUI accidents that have resulted in deaths. And so there's a parallel track. There's the criminal case that's being prosecuted for the vehicular homicide. And then there's a civil case that's being prosecuted that I'm handling for, money damages for the family, essentially. And the law is that if it's a minor that's responsible for, say, like a DUI, then and there's a restitution order in the criminal case. So in the civil case, you can be ordered to pay damages, but also in the criminal case, the state has a right to pursue damages on behalf of the victim
Mhm.
and get a damage order in the criminal case. And a lot of people don't know that. And in that criminal case, if the prosecutor gets a damage order and it's a minor defendant, the parent is responsible for that restitution. So it's
Mm.
joint and several liability, meaning the minor has to pay 100% of it if they can, but if they can't, the parent has to pay.
Mhm.
So
And
if you
let's be real. Most of the time, the minor probably
Right.
can't.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you have a child that's committed a crime
Mhm.
and there's a restitution order that's entered, you could be liable for payment of that restitution order.
Mhm.
Now, there's a couple things that the court looks at. The parent's ability to pay is one of the factors that the court considers in enforcing a restitution order
Yeah.
against the parent. So if the parents don't have financial means, the chances that that judgment is going to be, collected against them is less likely. But if you are a family with resources and your child goes out behind the wheel and is drunk or intoxicated and kills
Mhm.
someone, that's a restitution order that you as a parent are probably going to be responsible for.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think a lot of people think about criminal cases and think that money could be collected in the context of a criminal
Right.
case like that. So
Right.
yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah. And for the lawyer listeners, this is also just like a great nugget. I've had the civil case resolve before the criminal case wraps up, which doesn't always happen because usually the civil case, the hands of justice turn a lot slower in the civil world than
Yep.
they do in the criminal world. But sometimes it lines up. And if you get the civil case resolved first, you can actually request your attorney fee share and case costs to go after the responsible party in the civil case as part of the money damages in the restitution order.
Mm.
So you can really make your client whole because
Yeah.
not only do they get the portion of the settlement that was for them, they can then in the criminal case go back and get the attorney's fees that they had to pay you to prosecute the case, which is
Yeah.
in some cases can be a lot of money.
And are restitution dollars offset by the damages in your case or vice versa?
Great question. Yes and no. It depends on who pays. So we're talking this episode about parent liability.
Yeah.
So if a parent's insurance policy pays in the civil case, the criminal defendant is not entitled to offset against the restitution. The parent is.
Yeah.
So the parent isn't then responsible because the parent's insurance paid in the civil case, but the child doesn't get the benefit of the parent's insurance,
Got
if
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. See, these are all the legal loophole somersaults
Nuance.
things that we need to do as lawyers representing people, right? Is looking at the damages pots and how we're going to get there. And
Mhm.
one thing you mentioned at the beginning was like possible liability for graffiti. And I think
Mhm.
that's so interesting. I think graffiti is something that's actually pretty misunderstood by people. I think like there's probably a large group of people that think that graffiti is just people being bored and kind of wanting to be a vandal and that they don't really attribute much meaning to it. But it actually is pretty connected to gang signals, from what
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Like marking territory and things like that and signaling to other gangs that this is your neighborhood or block or whatever. And there have been efforts by cities to remove graffiti and spend a lot of money removing graffiti.
Huge efforts. San
And
Francisco has an entire graffiti task force.
Right. Yeah.
Full-time staff, people dedicated to remedying graffiti, deterring graffiti,
Yeah.
cleaning up graffiti.
And I think I saw somewhere too that it was pretty directly correlated between graffiti and crime in certain neighborhoods, and not only because it just so happens to be also gang neighborhoods, maybe, but just something about the psychological effect of seeing a lot of graffiti around you
Yeah.
makes
Broken window theory.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you go, you got it.
Yeah.
So what's liability for graffiti removal? Is there any for parents?
Yeah, you're on the hook. So if your kid goes and causes $20,000 of damage, you are responsible for paying that bill. There are different cities that also do rewards to identify people that are committing vandalism. So sometimes they'll put like a post up on their Facebook. Do you recognize this person who's been tagging under this bridge? And it'll be a face of somebody. If somebody recognizes them and calls in the tip line, then they can get, like a reward essentially.
Wow.
And the parent can be responsible for paying the cost to fix the graffiti, but then also paying the community reward that was paid
There you go.
to identify their child as the person that is responsible.
Is making all that casual street art that
Yeah.
isn't licensed or isn't allowed.
Right.
And what about parent liability for car accidents? Because I thought parents You're the expert in this, so you tell me. But I
Yeah.
thought parents had to sign off to some degree on their child actually getting a driver's license.
Yeah. So now as a parent, I'm this, you're just always interested in things that affect you more. And
Yeah.
now as a parent, I'm starting to read more articles and see, oh, I could be expelled. And my child's 4.
I was gonna
So
say.
we're a ways off. I'm
Let's
not
hope.
worried about him.
Let's hope you're not getting him an e-motorcycle tomorrow.
Definitely not. And so I don't know if this has always been the case or if there's been a shift, but I know now when you sign the application for a driver's license for a minor, the parent is like a co-signer on the application. And maybe that was the case when I got my driver's license and I just don't remember. But I was reading recently that now as a parent, you have to sign as a co-signer. And so you're accepting liability. So if your minor child is driving a vehicle and gets into a car accident, then you are accepting liability for the harm. Now there's, again, statutory caps. So it's not like unlimited liability. That's just because you've signed the application. So there's caps on that. But you could also have direct liability, right? So this is one of those hybrid areas where there's statutory liability that's a smaller amount, but then direct liability can be unlocked based on, again, if your child is somebody who's had 3 street racing, well, you wouldn't have 3, you'd get your license pulled by then. But if you have, if your parent knows that you are into street racing, if your parent knows that you've got some souped up car that you're taking to all these track days and you've got this propensity, or you're in some street racing, drag racing club.
Or if the parent paid for the soup up car and knew that you had a propensity for racing.
Right. Yeah, you had a case that was involved street racing, right?
Yeah.
And so what did you find in that case in terms of whether you can hold the parent liable for the actions of the minor?
Well, this is a case I filed at my old firm and I left the firm. So I don't know what happened to that case after. I did not take that case with me. But that's how we pled it, is there were facts to allege that, and this is all obviously publicly filed, but there were facts to allege that a parent had knowledge of his minor son's propensity for speeding and driving very fast, and even took him to the racetrack a couple times. And there were facts alleged around him paying for his son to soup up his car and have it drive faster than it would have normally been able to drive, and modify it in other ways and things like that. And so obviously the lawsuit was a very, very unfortunate and all around totally tragic situation where 2 young men pulled up at a red light and decided to drag race and drove excessively fast and killed parents with 2 twin daughters sitting in the back seat of the car. Instantly killed the parents. And one of the drivers was a minor in high school, and the other one was 21 years old. And it's tragic for everybody involved with that split-second decision, right? But the parents of the minor driver may have had some role in that. And that's sort of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's terrible.
It changes lives. It changes entire trajectories of entire lives, or ends lives, So the stakes are high.
Yeah. I looked up the statutory liability because I couldn't remember in my mind. When you co-sign the driver's license, you're limited to $15,000 per injury. 30,000 per accident as a parent. So I don't want parents out there to be like, forget it, you're not getting a driver's license until you're 20 now because I don't want to have any liability.
So you're out of the house.
The statutory liability, again, if it's just like a straightforward car accident, they didn't have a propensity, you didn't have knowledge that they were bad drivers, just a run-of-the-mill car accident and they're under age 18, there's going to be statutory liability that's capped at $15,000 per injured party, $30,000 for the car accident itself, and your auto insurance should cover that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anjay. You're an expert in this area, like so many different areas. And I hope that the knowledge that we shared helps some people keep closer eyes on their children.
I know, right?
And just know the lay of the land when you're a parent, as if it's not already hard enough to parent children in this modern era.
Definitely.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Hopefully my 4-year-old won't cause too much chaos.
Yeah, don't give him a driver's license tomorrow.